the sauce, Alexander.
This is Watts.
Make sure you like, subscribe, Ring General Podcast.
And don't forget to subscribe to the Ring Generals, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter.
Absolutely.
Do it, or I will get you.
And you're watching the Ring General Podcast. Turn this man around. Turn this man around. Subscribe, like, and comment.
Well, raise a glass in the sky and salute the Ring Generals.
That's right.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Ring Generals Podcast. This is going to be a special edition of the Ring Generals Podcast. We're going to call this a Ring Generals Short. Joining me on the podcast today is, of course, my main man, the RKJ Man.
Let's talk that talk, y'all. Hypocritical Nick, what's good, my brother?
Hey guys, sorry to cut into this video, but I wanted to give a quick promotion on the content that we released earlier this week and last week. All of it's still evergreen. You can watch our UFC show from last week. Yes, it did preview and predict some of the fight nights. It talked about Max Holloway and it talked about Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. But we also discussed kind of moving into the future, UFC 258, UFC 259, and UFC 260. We also did, Eric did a UFC 4 video game simulation of Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor. It finished in the second round. Go watch and see who won. Did Eric get it right? Or did Eric get it wrong? That match finishes in the second round. And then, of course, earlier this week, we released a podcast. We talked about recapping UFC 257, what we think should happen with Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, and Conor McGregor. And then we moved in, and Eric, Jesse, and I gave our predictions of the Royal Rumble. RKJ Man, take it away.
Hey, man, you can go and like, comment, and subscribe on our old content, too, on this channel, like when my car caught on fire. Or the multitude of other blasphemous things Blackstradamus has said. So do us a favor, like, comment, and subscribe, and then also follow us on all of our social media platforms at The Ring Generals or at The Ring Generals 1 on Twitter. Correct, Nick?
Yes, it's at Ring Generals 1, capital R, capital G, the number 1.
Okay, thank you very much, Hypocritical Nick. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe, and raise a glass in the sky and salute the Ring Generals.
It's good. It's good. Waking up in the morning here, recording on Friday morning, a couple days before the Royal Rumble. I had to get your take on the Royal Rumble, man. We recorded, obviously, earlier this week. Schedules didn't align, but I knew you have a lot to say. You probably have the most to say about this Royal Rumble, so I wanted to give you a platform, even though you weren't able to get on the original scheduled podcast. So here's what we're going to do. And you get a bunch of time here, and I know this is going to be perfect for you because you like this. And I really want to get it and talk to you about some news we've heard since we last recorded. And then also, I really want to talk to you about the streaming deal that WWE has with NBC and the Peacock streaming network. And yeah, that's worth $1 billion with a B. So why don't we start with that? We'll get to the Royal Rumble in a second. Obviously, if you guys have been following wrestling during the week, I think the biggest news that's come out so far is that the WWE Network is not going to really be the WWE Network anymore. You're essentially going to be paying, if you want to see the WWE Network content, you're going to be paying for NBC's streaming platform, Peacock. And Peacock has 26 million subscribers, quote unquote, viewers to it. WWE Network never eclipsed 1.5 million. So it makes sense WWE would make this deal. And the rumors were that WWE, all the way going into last year, was already looking to sell off the WWE Network to somebody. And I think it has to do somewhat with the fact that they never eclipsed 1.5 million subscribers. So, RKJ, man, when you heard this earlier this week, what were your first thoughts, and what are your thoughts going forward about this whole deal?
Well, as much as we want to criticize Vince McMahon and say how terrible he is creatively right now, which I think we can all agree he's pretty bad at it, you have to give him credit for being a businessman. I mean, I'm pretty sure this was one of the main things they wanted to do once they started the network, is to sell it to one of their television partners. And they did it during a pandemic when a lot of streaming companies are really feeding for new content and fresh content. First of all, I didn't know that Peacock had 26 million subscribers. That was
I didn't either.
I don't know anybody in my circle who has Peacock. Like, I'm sorry, and I heard Saved by the Bell reboot is crap anyway. So, the fact of the matter is, for them to sell it to people who have a network like Peacock or streaming service like Peacock who has 26 million subscribers. That's huge, and that's a lot of content for the WWE to dish out, and that could be a huge boost in their ratings. My thing is this. First of all, for those of you who are saying that the WWE network is a failure because of this, I think you need to check yourself into a mental ward because you're crazy. The fact of the matter is this. For you to be able to say that, and then the WWE turns around and sells a deal for $1 billion with the B is huge. Okay, so that means without a shadow of a doubt, the network was a success. They clearly were just doing something right, and we saw throughout the pandemic because of all those things they were doing on the network. It was a situation where they were selling it. I see a lot of stuff on FS1, old WrestleManias, old Royal Rumbles, all this stuff. You know, you saw the stuff on ESPN. So there's a lot of things that the WWE was selling to other networks. And this is a way that you can create ancillary revenue. I probably said that wrong, but it's a way to create extra revenue for the WWE. My only thing is this. They're living off nostalgia. The fact of the matter is this. Most of us go to the network for things of the past. We don't go to things of the current day because it sucks so bad. Yeah, we'll go for the Royal Rumble, we'll go for WrestleMania, we'll go for current pay-per-views. But if we think the pay-per-views suck, we're not going to go to that. We're going to go to our old Raws during the Attitude Era. I know I did. Or old SmackDowns during the Attitude Era, or through the Ruthless Aggression era. We're going to see old things and old documentaries that we didn't really know that much about in the day because maybe we weren't born during that time or we weren't wrestling fans. So this is a huge opportunity for the WWE to build off nostalgia, but it's once again them relying on that nostalgia to make the money. And hey, if it works for them, it works for them. But that does not mean the product's going to get any better. For those of you who are thinking the product's going to get better because of this and the road to WrestleMania, I'm sorry to say this, but it ain't.
Yeah, no, in a lot of ways, this could actually make it worse because of that nostalgia point you're making, you know. And I'll be honest, like you're saying, I've done the same thing. I was even doing things 3-4 years ago. I was going back, reliving, going through the road to WrestleMania, to past WrestleManias. I hadn't fully kind of been able to enjoy the experience because I wasn't into wrestling until the early 2000s. And I would be watching that and more excited to watch a 2002 Raw than I was the Raw coming up in 2017, right? So it's understandable. And wrestling was better back then, and it was more popular, and the stars were, you know, more high profile and stuff like that. I'm not going to put the blame on the wrestlers now. They do, you know, a better job in the ring now than they did back in the day. They're more athletic, you know, so I'm not going to put it on the wrestlers. But yeah, they have a nostalgia problem. And now with the WWE Network being sold to NBC, you know, when you go on these streaming platforms, RKJ Man, like for example, I have HBO Max, right? I have it with my girlfriend here at the house. Now I don't care about most shows on HBO, but if something pops up that's interesting, or maybe I haven't seen in a while, I'll click on it. And I think what WWE is hoping for is when someone's watching the Peacock streaming deal, if that WWE stuff pops up, they might go, oh, you know, I used to watch WWE on you know, I used to watch WWE all the time. And so I'm going to check out what's going on this week. And maybe they watch it and maybe they like it, right? And we'll see if the ratings improve. And maybe the ratings will improve. But again, what we've been explaining as the ring generals probably the last 2 years is that the product has not gotten better. And unfortunately, when stuff like this continues to happen, it's not a good sign that the product is going to get better. Are there good things on WWE programming? Yes. But the whole entire show, you know, most of it, I'm clicking that fast forward button, right? I'm clicking that fast forward button. I'm not watching matches. I'm not watching certain segments. Like as of right now, even doing research for these past 2 shows that we're doing for the Ring Generals, you know, I'm watching Raw and SmackDown, but, you know, I'm probably watching 45 minutes worth of it max. Right, I'm not really watching most of it. I'll say this: SmackDown's a hell of a lot better than Raw. Watching it the last 2 weeks after not watching it for about a month. But one of the reasons that has to do with that is because it's, you know, I said this on the last podcast, so I'm not going to extend on this. But the 3 hours and 2 hours makes a big difference too. But you know, it's interesting. Now I want to get to the parameters of this deal really quickly. So RKJ Man, if you want to comment on any of this too, because I'm not sure if you saw some of these articles as well. So I'll try to throw you off guard here with some of this stuff. So like we mentioned, this is worth $1 billion. It's a 5-year deal, so $200 million a year realistically. I don't know if that's exactly what it is, but that's essentially what it amounts to. Big information here. It's going to be $4.99 normally with ads. So that's actually $5 less per month than we were already paying for the WWE Network. If you want it without ads, pretty much if you want the normal WWE Network, it's still $9.99. So essentially, you have the option of paying less if you can deal with ads, which suck. Ads suck. So I would urge most people and give advice to them that just pay the $9.99 you already were. But if you're like RKJ Man here and you hate most of the product and you only want to watch specific pay-per-views, maybe pay for the $4.99 and just grab a pay-per-view here and there and deal with the ads once in a while, right? But so that's a big deal with this. The price actually does lower if you want it to be. So here's some information. All of this is coming from Sportscaster Wrestling as well. So and also the Sports Business Journal, just to give some quotes on where this is coming from, right? So here's some sources within WWE about what the talent has thought about this. Apparently, the WWE talent has been walking in a cloud. They don't know if there's going to be cuts. They don't know if there's going to be raises. Because RKJ Man, there probably should be raises, right? When you make a deal like this worth $1 billion. So the talent is also being, kind of hidden from this. And there's also apparently NBC is reportedly going to deploy a hands-on approach that could affect WWE creative because of this deal. That's something that came out yesterday as well that I think a lot of people don't know about. So what are your thoughts on those two things? That's something that I think a lot of people didn't know about the original deal when it came out 4 or 5 days ago.
So first of all, we've always seen rumors about creative being affected by business deals, whether it be Fox, NBC, Universal, and the multitude of networks that WWE has done business with. And it never changes. So I won't believe anything until I see something. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing with these talent cuts and talent getting money, they should get money from this. They've been dealing with a loss in income and a loss of revenue. Now, granted, it's a situation where they can't tour as much, but Vince McMahon has actually earned more money during this pandemic, as has a lot of billionaires. And we don't need to get into economics and financial and stuff like that because it's going to go into a rabbit hole that we don't want to go down to on this podcast. But Vince McMahon should at least be shelling out some of that bread to some of the wrestlers who put their bodies on the line. Not every single night anymore, but a lot of the times during a pandemic. This should be the WWE's version of hazard pay. We hear about that a lot now. This should be the WWE's version of hazard pay. Here's a few extra $1,000 or $100,000 for your hard work and your service during the pandemic and all these things that we've had to deal with. That should definitely be happening. But I have a question for you, Nick. A few years ago, we had a interesting debate about WrestleMania and about it being on live broadcast television. You said, I don't want to watch WrestleMania with commercials. I think we're getting closer and closer to having WrestleMania on an NBC. What do you think about that possibility, obviously, in having it? Now, Peacock can do a thing where, hey, you can watch it on NBC. You're going to get commercials. If you watch it on a streaming platform, you won't get commercials. So you'll be able to see the full match and full commentary. What do you think about the possibility? Because I think we're getting closer and closer to WrestleMania one day being on broadcast television.
Well, I'll stick to my guns here. It's essentially the same thing as I thought about Fox last year or a few years ago whenever we talked about this.
2 years ago.
I don't want to see commercials because if I'm going to pay for something, I guess I wouldn't be paying for it if it was on national television, but I don't want to see commercials in wrestling because I already don't like commercials in wrestling on Raw and SmackDown and AEW. At least AEW has a little picture-in-picture format that they use to where if you really want to just keep watching wrestling during the match, you could most of the time, right? So I like that. But for WrestleMania, I don't want to see a WrestleMania match cut in by commercials. That makes no sense to me. And it would make WrestleMania... it would make me pay less attention to it, and what are you going to run a live broadcast for 7 hours straight? What is that going to do? Nothing ever does that. Can you name one show on television or one sporting event that lasts 5-6 hours without it being like a quadruple overtime hockey game or a football game that goes into second overtime or something like that, right? Like, so there's
Well, I was
there's
going to say
nothing.
Super Bowl because Super Bowl has like 4 or 5 hours of pregame coverage.
Well, I'm not talking about pregame coverage though, because pregame coverage, I'm talking about, they say WrestleMania starting at 4:00, and it starts at 4:00, and the first match is the first match, and then they go until 9 or 10 o'clock with the whole show. You know what I'm saying? They're obviously doing the 2-night thing again this year for Tampa. I think that works out because obviously pandemic, you can get more fans in there. You can potentially get more different fans in there. So I think if anything, this is for the fans, the 2-night thing. I don't know if that will continue moving on. I've always thought that they need to condense WrestleMania like they always did. WrestleMania always used to be about 4.5 hours, which is fine. Like you mentioned, the Super Bowl ends up being about 4 hours with the halftime show and all that stuff, 4.5 hours. And people are down because it's the Super Bowl. It's the biggest thing that the NFL shows all year. With WrestleMania, it's the same thing. And actually in the wrestling business, it's the biggest wrestling show. So no, and again, I don't want to see commercials. I don't think that would happen because they've already talked about in this deal, essentially it being similar to the UFC, where if there is Peacock streaming it for $9.99, the pay-per-view might cost a little bit more, or you can choose to buy the pay-per-view normally. So I don't think if it's a live broadcast, Peacock's going to have 3 minutes of commercials in between TV. I think if you're paying $9.99, if they add $10 onto that, still a pretty good deal for WrestleMania, right? Obviously, WWE Network didn't do that, but WWE Network could kind of afford to lose the money because they're making a ton from India and from Saudi Arabia and all this other stuff on all these other deals. So, no, I still do not want to watch commercials in wrestling. And that's why I choose to watch Raw and SmackDown and AEW after they've broadcast.
So it's funny because we're seeing this a lot now with these companies, these major networks going to streaming services. I mean, we're talking about the NFL here, and the Super Bowl is coming up very soon next week. And, I'm reading about the NFL possibly doing a deal to give one of their packages to a streaming service, whether it's Yahoo, Amazon, whatnot, because streaming is the way of the future. I'm starting to wonder more and more now when the next television deal comes up, if maybe the ratings still aren't as strong for Raw or even for SmackDown for Fox. If they have their own streaming platforms, I could see them possibly giving them a deal to try to move to those streaming platforms. And I honestly see streaming as the way of the future. I don't think in 20 to 30 years we're going to be watching television like we used to watch television. I think streaming is the way of the future. And I think the WWE is being very smart here, getting in on the ground floor with the network. Obviously, the network was a huge innovation. The same people who did Disney actually made the network. So it's very, very interesting, what the network's been able to achieve. But, a lot of people are making these statements. Oh, well, the network was a failure because they couldn't get above 1.5 million people. Well, guess what? They're selling it for $1 billion. So clearly they were doing something right. They had a lot of content on that network that saved them during the pandemic, that they were just shelling out to these networks during the pandemic. When we had no sports, they were just giving it out. So the fact of the matter is, I think this network is, them getting on the streaming Peacock deal is a good thing, but we're seeing a way in people consuming television and how they stream their content. And I think it's going to be different for wrestling for a very long time. Even AEW, we hear about them. I was reading a report today. Dave Meltzer said something about how AEW in the 18 to 49 demo range, more people were actually streaming the recent AEW broadcast on Wednesday night than they were actually watching the episode, if I'm not mistaken, on television.
What are they streaming it on? I don't understand.
I forgot what app they were streaming on. I think
what does AEW go on besides TNT?
Warner Media app, something, or the Bleacher Report app, I believe.
So AEW goes live on the Bleacher Report app every single week?
I'm not sure, but they were on some type of app. I'll have to check it out. But they were on some type of app a few days ago, and there was an issue with it, and a lot of people were complaining.
I will say this. That it'd be interesting to see what happens in the future with those ratings, because last week they had an issue in their first match. The screen was dark for a lot of people. So maybe the reason people went to go stream it is because they simply just couldn't watch it on TNT. So it'd be interesting to see if that was a 1 week thing where people just went to, it's similar to what happened with UFC. UFC had an issue where nobody could watch it on ESPN Plus when they purchased it. Literally, Eric, Jesse, and I all struggled to watch the first fight. We all had an issue. Apparently, it was a big West Coast issue. We purchased the pay-per-view like normal, and we actually had to go to the streaming sites, which they were trying to attack. It was a crazy, crazy story. But so I would assume that's why people went to go watch Warner Media this week, because the first 20 minutes of Dynamite essentially were not on TV. But so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. One more thing I wanted to mention is you mentioned that it not being a failure and it's selling for $1 billion. Guys, it sold for $1 billion for 5 years. And apparently WWE, what they're calling this is merely leasing the content to NBC. So they could actually take it back at the end of that and sell it for more to somebody else if they want to. So it's not a failure. $1 billion is more than TNT's given AEW, I believe. So you guys talking about failures, you know, it's the wrong thing to do. WWE's smart. Vince McMahon is a smart businessman. And essentially, it's the only thing he's doing right during this whole entire pandemic. All right, let's switch to the Royal Rumble because there's so much to talk about here. You know, RKJ, I could obviously just throw it out there and be like, hey, what do you think is going to happen at the Royal Rumble? Because I think there's enough here with news to just kind of go off that and discuss these certain topics that have come out. I want to start with what came out earlier this week. It was a Wrestle Votes tweet. Wrestle Votes has become one of the more great sources in professional wrestling for how accurate they are and how truthful they are. It doesn't seem like they're bought by anybody or anything like that. And so they came out, just to give Wrestle Votes a little bit of credit if you guys don't know who they are. So here was what their tweet said. It said, sorry for the lack of details here, but still noteworthy in my opinion. Had a brief conversation earlier with a source regarding the men's Royal Rumble match. They said, and quote, there's a finish that scares the death out of me, and it's legitimately getting heavy conversation. Yikes. RKJ Man, your comments on that.
I think we all know what the finish is. Everybody and their mom knows what the finish is. It's Goldberg losing to Drew McIntyre and then re-entering himself back into the Royal Rumble, winning the Royal Rumble, and then facing Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. That is the scenario that could very well happen. I say there's a 60% chance that happens this week.
Oh, I'll give it 60%. No, I mean, and what's funny is, so if you guys saw the last podcast, and if you did, there was one common theme about the Royal Rumble, or about the Royal Rumbles, I should say. We don't want Charlotte or Goldberg winning anything this weekend. We don't want them winning anything. So I'm going to stick with that. I think you can agree with that, RKJ, man. We don't want him winning anything either. Right?
But Vince don't care. This man just got $1 billion. This man just got $1 billion. And the network was a success in terms of financially. The network didn't have anything. So this man could do whatever he wants to and still make money. Look, I see a lot of fans out here complaining about the WWE, saying, oh my God, we're not going to watch it. It's such bullshit. And then as soon as that WrestleMania ticket information come out, they're like, let me figure out a way to get to WrestleMania. Let me see if I can get the vaccine. Let me see the quarantine. Let me ask you this, okay? Are you really going to take a vaccine or have to be forced to quarantine again just for Goldberg versus Roman Reigns? Let that sit in right there. Let that sink in. Do you really want to do that and then go and watch Goldberg versus Roman Reigns, a 5-minute match?
I'll say this. Why not quarantine, get a temperature check, and go to Revolution in Miami? You'll probably get a better show, right, for AEW in Miami. Like, I'm serious. Like, why not just drive a little bit south and a little bit east to Miami around that weekend and move up your trip about a month forward to March 7th or whenever they end up having this pay-per-view, because the pay-per-view's moved at like 3 different dates already. And now they're rumored to be having the NBA All-Star game now on TNT on that Sunday too. Oh, Lord, so they might move it again.
I just realized that. Oh man.
But so why not do that? But let's get back to the Royal Rumble here. So you think it's Goldberg that's this? I mean, I guess when someone's saying yikes in the wrestling business, it has to be Goldberg, right? Like, who else could it possibly be? Because I went over a bunch of people we went over a ton of people on the last podcast discussing who we thought could win. I had names like Daniel Bryan, Shinsuke Nakamura, Cesaro, Sheamus, Aleister Black, just names they threw out there that have been rumored and certain things with some of the champions. And, that's just what was happening. None of us mentioned Goldberg. None of us mentioned The Undertaker or anybody that would scare us. Who else do you think this could mean if it's not Goldberg? Or are you just standing here and assuming this means Goldberg has a heavy influence on this match?
Oh, it absolutely means Goldberg has a heavy influence on this match. Nobody likes Goldberg. Nobody. Not even the talent behind the scenes like Goldberg. It's pretty much a known thing that nobody cares for this guy being in any more wrestling matches. And the only one pushing for him to be there is Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard too. But I'm going to mostly blame Vince McMahon on this. So it's a situation where we know what the deal is. And I'm hoping and praying that somebody can step up to the plate and say, hey, I'm the rightful person to win this Royal Rumble, and I'm going to give you that person, Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what we all want. You know, we wanted it in 2015. They gave us Roman Reigns, and we booed him and The Rock out of the building, right? There won't be that. Unfortunately, there won't be that booing this year because there won't be any fans. So it does scare you a little bit what could possibly happen here, right? You know, so I'll move on to some other things that could also impact the Royal Rumble. There's reports coming out from No DQ and Dave Meltzer earlier today as well that I'm going to read, just to give them the credit. So when I'm reading this, I'm not using our own words. These aren't my own notes. These are what these people have come out and said. So Dave Meltzer is reporting that the only thing that has been decided, or that hasn't been decided, the only thing about WrestleMania that has been decided is the opponent for Roman Reigns, and it's not Shinsuke Nakamura. So if you guys think it's Shinsuke Nakamura, according to Dave Meltzer, it's not. Now, has Dave Meltzer been wrong in the past? Yes, of course. And have they even intentionally moved things to make Dave Meltzer wrong? Yes, but that's a strong rumor coming out, and I think Shinsuke Nakamura probably shouldn't be the guy at WrestleMania because it wouldn't make much sense to the whole head of the table thing, right? It wouldn't. Meltzer also brought up that there is speculation about Randy Orton versus The Fiend being held off until WrestleMania. As of right now, I believe that match is not on the Royal Rumble card. And so Randy Orton was originally planned to face Edge, and Orton versus Fiend could open the door for Edge to compete against either Drew McIntyre or Roman Reigns. So we could see now that it's not going to be Randy Orton versus Edge at WrestleMania. It could be Edge fighting for the title at WrestleMania, something that the ring generals did not predict that Edge would be winning any of these matches. And John Cena is expected to be part of the show. That's a rumor that we all believed and already expected. But his role is undecided for the time being. So maybe throwing some doubt into my old John Cena winning the Royal Rumble thing I had there. So, you know, RKJ Man, again, when you hear stuff like this, what does it make you think about? Does it make it more that this report came out a couple days after that Wrestle Votes report? So it's two different people reporting these things. So we don't know where the sources are coming from. But when you hear that, you know, after hearing the Wrestle Votes tweet, what are your thoughts?
They're on the way there, but they're still not there. I don't think Edge should be competing for a title.
I don't think so either.
I don't think
that's stupid.
I would be okay with Edge going to SmackDown and facing Seth Rollins and continuing that storyline from a while ago when Seth Rollins almost broke Edge's neck.
Good point. Yeah.
For WrestleMania. That's a matchup that a lot of people wanted last year for WrestleMania. I wanted last year for WrestleMania, and they went with the Randy Orton direction. I like this Fiend versus Randy Orton storyline concluding at WrestleMania. This is a perfect WrestleMania storyline. I'm getting the Undertaker versus Kane vibes from WrestleMania 14 from this thing, where these guys barely kind of interact. They interact in certain ways, but they don't touch each other until WrestleMania season. I like that. And you could do something with Alexa Bliss in the meantime as a big thing to get him ready for the Fiend in terms of Randy Orton. I'm okay with John Cena facing Drew McIntyre for the 17th championship. I'm not okay with him winning the Royal Rumble. I am never okay with an old superstar coming back who's a part-timer coming back and winning the Royal Rumble anymore. I'm not down with that anymore because I think the Royal Rumble is reserved for either established stars like Daniel Bryan or stars you're trying to build up like a Keith Lee or a Big E. Those are stars that they're trying to get over. And those are the stars who need the rub. John Cena doesn't need the rub. He's won 2-3 Royal Rumbles before?
Yeah, at least two. Two.
He's won multiple Royal Rumbles, which he's in very select company with that. So he doesn't need that opportunity. He doesn't need the Royal Rumble. The Royal Rumble needs to go to someone else who desperately needs it. But, it's a situation where I think they're on the right track. But being on the right track doesn't always get you there. And these plans change multiple times. But in that article with Dave Meltzer, he said someone had told him, in all my years in the business, I've never seen plans being so in flux right now. So
Yeah.
being so in flux right now, we don't know what's going to happen for the Royal Rumble this weekend and for the road to WrestleMania.
Well, okay, so with that note, because we're coming to an end to what we have as far as time here on this podcast, RKJ Man, give me your predictions. Why don't you, and you can do it real quickly, too. If you want to give your predictions on everything that's going on, at least the 4 matches that we went over on the podcast, we went over the 2 title matches, and then we went over the men's and women's Royal Rumbles. Why don't you give your predictions on who wins all 4 of those matches real quickly here to end this podcast?
So Goldberg versus Drew McIntyre, I'm picking Goldberg to lose that match. There's no reason why, unless you're concerned about Drew McIntyre's COVID situation, which he's recovered, he's back on Raw, you shouldn't be losing on the road to WrestleMania. Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens. I mean, this is a really interesting match. I know Kevin Owens has been making a very good name for himself on SmackDown. But I think Roman Reigns is going to win. And I think what's going to happen is the other Uso brother, I think he's been out with injury. I think he's coming back. Yeah, I think he's coming back to help Roman Reigns win in that last man standing match. Or you could see something like the matchup, I believe is King of the Ring 2000 when Chris Jericho and Triple H face each other, and Triple H was the last man standing by a second. So you could see something like that. All right, let's talk about the Royal Rumble matches. I believe in the Women's Royal Rumble, it makes absolutely no sense for Bianca Belair to lose the Royal Rumble. She's got to win the Royal Rumble. And the reason why is very simple. Bianca Belair versus Sasha Banks is a money-making match. You can put that on night 1 as the main event of night 1, and these ladies can tear the house down for 25 to 30 minutes. I see how they've been building Bianca Belair versus Bayley. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pick Bianca Belair and Bayley to be the last 2 in the Royal Rumble in that match, in the Women's Royal Rumble, and I believe Bianca Belair is going to win it. She has superstar potential in Bianca Belair, and she's that next big star, and I believe it's really good to see a diverse WrestleMania with Bianca Belair versus Sasha Banks is the night 1 card for the Women's Championship for SmackDown for WrestleMania. And the second one, Men's Royal Rumble.
Here we go.
Look, okay, so I talked to you about this earlier this week, okay? Daniel Bryan needs to win the Royal Rumble. He knows it. We all know it. The issue is not Vince on this one. I'm not going to put the onus on Vince on this. This is on Daniel Bryan. I think Daniel Bryan is a little concerned about all the history of bookers and wrestlers. So we heard Cody Rhodes mention it last year on Dynamite, how Dusty Rhodes got some heat. Ric Flair got some heat. Cody's got some heat. Triple H has gotten some heat. It's been a situation where they have been wrestlers and they've also been involved in the booking decision. And I think Daniel Bryan at this point in his career, I understand he wants to give back to the wrestling business, right? He wants to eventually go part-time very, very soon. And he wants younger stars to succeed. And Big E has said he's had a very big influence on his run right now in his single run on SmackDown. But Daniel Bryan should be a little selfish in this situation. Sometimes you've got to be a little selfish. And Daniel Bryan needs to go to Vince McMahon in the next day or two and say, this is the reason why I need to win the Royal Rumble. It just makes sense from a storyline perspective. He's already got heat with Jey Uso. So you have a built-in storyline for the next 2 months because WrestleMania season takes forever. They have multiple pay-per-views and multiple events and multiple shows. So you have a built-in storyline for them to feud. And then after that, you can build off the Fastlane pay-per-view from 5 years ago when Roman Reigns was just coming up in the business and he was facing Daniel Bryan. And you have 2 family men. So it makes sense, and I think Daniel Bryan has to do it. But I think my personal opinion, Nick, is that Daniel Bryan is scared of that backstage heat. Now, a lot of people say, well, Bryan, backstage heat doesn't exist anymore. It absolutely does. Go ask The Undertaker. Go ask Goldberg. Hey, go ask Ryback. Okay, go ask him if backstage heat in the WWE doesn't exist anymore. People don't like you in the WWE. It absolutely exists. And I'm afraid that Daniel Bryan, because he is such a selfless person and he's a person who wants to give back to the wrestling industry that has given him so much, he's going to say, I don't want it. But he, deep down inside, he's got to know that he is the only person on that SmackDown brand who deserves to win the Royal Rumble this weekend.
Yeah, no, I mean, you hit the nail right in the head. It's what a lot we said on the last podcast, too. We explained in the Women's Royal Rumble that we think there should be no other women besides these three that should even be in consideration for winning the Royal Rumble. We said Bianca Belair, of course, Bayley, and we threw in Alexa Bliss because of her character tying into the Fiend and her being the only Raw superstar that realistically deserves to be in a highlight match at WrestleMania. And in the men's, I think three of us, at least three out of the four of us, have said Daniel Bryan should win. So, it makes a lot of sense. And essentially, it's just we don't want Goldberg to win, right? Eric actually mentioned something very interesting. He actually came up with this. He said that when we actually planned and we talked about predicting the Royal Rumble, I said, well, let's think about all outcomes. So Eric took it literally and said, well, I'm going to throw Matt Riddle in there because if Goldberg does win the WWE Championship and Matt Riddle wins the Royal Rumble, who doesn't want to see Matt Riddle versus Goldberg, right? That's the only way that realistically Goldberg winning the WWE Championship against Drew McIntyre could even fit into a WrestleMania plan. I'm going to throw that out there. If you haven't thought about that, that's the one way Goldberg could work on this whole thing as the champion. Other than that, though, we don't want that horrible scenario of John Cena versus Goldberg for the title, right?
Just say this real quick. Matt Riddle is being portrayed as a doofus on television right now. That's just what's going on. He's being portrayed as a jackass on television right now. And so I don't know about that. And then I'm sorry to say this, but those whole speaking out allegations, that situation is still remaining to be unsolved. So as we get closer and closer to WrestleMania and these networks start covering it, like, oh my God, just look at how many people is going to be in the stands and whatnot. Oh, the main event is Matt Riddle versus Goldberg. Oh, look at those allegations that he has. Then it's going to turn into a whole big thing. You need somebody who's spotless in their record right now. And Matt Riddle has a few things that we don't want the mainstream media to find out about.
Yeah, no, very good, very, very good point. Always fun, RKJ Man, being on here talking wrestling. We could have talked about 3 or 4 other subjects, but we got a big Royal Rumble week. Real quickly, I heard a rumor too that you want Conor McGregor to retire after his loss last week. I'm gonna throw a bone at you. You didn't know I was gonna mention this. What is that all about? I was perplexed to hear that.
I think it's time for Conor McGregor to give up the ghost. I mean, last night he lost $250 million with the Pacquiao deal. I don't think his mind is on MMA anymore. I think he needs to finish out this deal that he has, whatever deal he has with Dana White. He needs to finish that out with UFC, and he needs to go in to be an announcer, or he needs to go to the WWE, or he can do boxing every now and then. But I think Conor McGregor's got to go. But the problem is if he goes to the WWE, I don't want him going on his back, just like Brock Lesnar did, or just like Ronda Rousey did. It's almost like it was scripted for them to lose before they pop back up in the WWE. Like, it's ridiculous. I want him being on top, but I just don't think he has the passion anymore for UFC anymore. He got knocked out by Dustin Poirier, and I get it. Dustin Poirier was good and whatnot, and he was great and all this stuff, and he's improved a lot. But, I mean, come on. You get knocked out by Dustin Poirier, like, in the second round. And he's got memes everywhere with Jordan memes over his face. Like, come on, guys. Like, Bernie Sanders is sitting next to Conor McGregor. You know what I'm saying? With his hands like this. Like, come on, guys. Like, come on, Conor. Just give up the ghost. You lost a lot of money from that fight. He's not focused on UFC anymore. He's focused on his own Conor brand, and that's okay. He's made that abundantly clear. He can do whatever he wants. So get the bleep out of UFC as soon as the situation presents itself and go make more money elsewhere, because he's a good-looking guy. He can talk well. He has charisma, and guess what? He can go anywhere he wants.
Yeah, no, I mean, you make some good points. It's absolutely a possibility. I've heard other people in the MMA community say similar stuff, that Conor McGregor could be added. So you're not totally far off. When Jesse told me that the other day, I was like, oh, wait, when we go on recording, I got to throw this at him.
Yeah, I told him
when he doesn't know, I'm going to throw it. Yeah.
It's time to go. You lost to Dustin Poirier. Like, if Dustin Poirier were to face Khabib tomorrow, he would get his ass whooped, and we all know it.
Like he did the first time. He got like tapped out in the early rounds and got dominated by Khabib the first time he fought.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
No, it wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. All right, that's been this Ring General short, short meaning 35 minutes, but short. RKJ Man, always love it. I'm excited to watch the Royal Rumble. I'm excited to be texting you about it and stuff like that, because it's going to be craziness if, realistically Daniel Bryan doesn't win. But if Goldberg wins this thing, man, we should just get on right after the fucking Royal Rumble and just be honest and just,
Well,
we're gonna be demonetized for what we say after about Goldberg winning. We don't even make money. So that's how bad it's gonna be.
It's gonna be worse than when I made that comment about Lacey Evans botching and that stuff.
That's true. That's true. I'm just gonna be hitting up Cornette the whole weekend. All right, man. Take it away. Finish off this podcast for us.
Hey, man, really quickly. Hey, shout outs to GCW tonight. They're doing this whole thing, Fight Forever. Go ahead after this podcast and check them out. You can also donate. You can go on their Twitter account and get more information about GCW Fight Forever. It's a big thing for the wrestlers. The industry's been affected by COVID, so go ahead and watch that after our podcast. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. Raise a glass in the sky and salute the ring generals.